Welcome to the 11th video of this playlist and the second part of videos of functions. Today we're going to learn more about functions, things like default arguments, named arguments, or no arguments at all, and much more stuff. So let's have a revision here of our last video, how to make a function. So with fun keyword, and our function, then give it a name. So our function is going to print hi for 10 times, for example. So print for 10. Is not going to take any arguments and it will return nothing, so unit, and we can emit unit from adding here. And then we're going to make a for loop as it's going to print for 10 times. So for I in 1 to 10 println hi. Now let's call this in our main and run the program, and here comes the result, 10 highs. Great. Now let's discuss default arguments. So here we have two functions. Both are called buy me food, and the first one takes food as an argument of type string, and the second one doesn't. So say now we use the buy me food function, buy me food, and here we have two. So I'm just gonna specify any one of them with no arguments. It's gonna be this one. Arguments, they're gonna be this one here. So the compiler will decide which one to use depending on your writing to the code. Now if you run the program, this one is going to be printed. So here we have pizza. Great. But what if I want to buy another thing, like, for example, I want to be more specific, pineapple pizza. Let's run the program. And now our first function is called, which is this one here, pineapple pizza. Let's try another thing, for example, a burger, maybe. And here comes the result. Great. The reason why we had two functions that do the same thing is because the first function here prints a custom food, and the other function here prints the default value for the food whenever we don't want to pass anything. So Kotlin handles this with something called default arguments. So instead of having functions overloading here, you can have a single function that has a default value to it passed to its argument. And the way to do this is we assign a default value here with the equal sign to the argument, and we write pizza. Then this function is pretty useless, so we're gonna have less code with the same result. Let's now have another example. I have a function here that prints the user info, and we have age type int set to 0 by default, height double set to 0.0, name by default is set to guest. And when you run the program, you would have these values here. And for example, you want to change the age, so maybe 14, and the height 160.5, but you want to leave the name to be the default value. When you run, you would have everything set, but for the name is set to the default value here. Say for instance you only want to provide the name, so I'm gonna just have John here, but now we have an error saying that we have to pass the arguments as the order they have been set within the function here. So if you want to pass something as the first argument, it should be the int or the age here, and the second argument must be the height, so 1 point something, and the third is for the name. But you only wanted to provide the name, so for that we have something in Kotlin called named arguments. So if you want to set the name, what you're going to do is just type name here, the name of the argument. So we have age, height, name, so name of the arguments is equal to John. And now this value here is going to be replaced, or is going to replace guest here, and the same values here is going to be printed. Now let's run the program. And here's the result, 0, 0, and John. And maybe you want to enter another thing like the height. The height in the middle. Let's try the first one, which is the age. So the age is 14. On the program, and here comes the result. So the height is not set, the others are. So named arguments help you to write the parameters or the pass parameters to the function in any order that you want, as well as if you want to only change one argument within the functions or within the arguments list, like I just wanted to change the name here, then you're able to do that with named arguments. So far, so good. Let's have another way to write a function. And I'm sure this is going to be the most simplest way to write a function, and you're going to like it. So I'm going to make a function that returns the sum of two numbers. It's going to be so easy. So sum of x of type int, y of type int, and here we just return the sum. So int, just like before, and I'm going to say return x plus y. So this is just maybe too much, but you could write it in a shorter way. And this happens with the equal sign. So instead of opening the body and specifying the type, you could just say this function returns x plus y. And here, that's it. And if you just press Ctrl Q here, you'd find that this function returns an int. And let's have the sum here. So sum equal to sum of 10 and 20. Now let's print the sum. So this is another way to write a function with something called single expression. And here's the full implementation of the two functions which do the same thing. So this returns x plus y, and this returns x plus y as well. So you might be confused when to specify the return type of function and when you should not specify the type. So here our function, the second function, has body, and whenever the function has a body, then specifying the return type is a must. And whenever it doesn't have a body, like the first function here, then you don't have to specify the return type as it is inferred by the compiler. Now let's discuss another feature of Kotlin's functions. We have here two functions that prints the sum of the numbers passed to them. And I know I'm using the same example over and over again. I just wanted to make it simple and relatable. So the first one prints the sum of two numbers. The second one, three numbers. Maybe it would have four numbers, five numbers, six numbers, endless amount of numbers. And this is going to be too much to write, too many functions. This is just tedious to do. So instead of that, we could use the Vararg keyword. So the var keyword helps you to make a function when you don't know the amount of arguments that the function takes. You could add the var keyword and it will just allow you to add a lot of arguments without specifying the number of them. Maybe one, maybe two, maybe more, or maybe no arguments at all. So here, I'm just gonna add the var keyword, and our parameter is going to be numbers, and it's of type int. So I'm going to receive a list or an amount of ints within the function here as parameters. And now if we call the function in the main, so print sum of, see that it takes a Vararg numbers of int. So we could just do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, so on and so forth, and it will just accept whatever you insert within the function parameters. And here to print sum, let's just complete our example. So I'm going to make a sum variable equal to 0 initially, and make a for loop for every num in numbers. Add that num to the sum, so sum num, and lastly I'm going to print the sum here. And now if you run the function, or if you run the program, we would have the function of these numbers here, so 21. So this is just a neat way to do it instead of having functions overloading. Two things to note about Vararg. So the first one is that the Vararg must be the last argument of your arguments list. So say for example you have a message here to be printed with the sum of type string, and here just going to say the message, so message and the sum. Now we have an error saying that we have to add the sum or the message, this message here. So I'm just going to comma and sum is. Now we have an error, another error, saying that expects an int and I have passed a string, as the Vararg here expects more arguments to be passed. So whenever you have another argument along with the Vararg, then put the Vararg to be the last argument. And here I'm going to make it the last argument. I'm going to take sum from here to be added as the first one, like so. So Vararg must be the last parameter, as you can add more things to it. So make sure always to make it as the last argument. The second thing is whenever you want to pass a list of the data type that you have specified for the Vararg. So the Vararg here expects ints, and you have a list of integers, so list of integers that you want to pass to the Vararg, then you cannot pass it directly. So let's try this, numbers, and here you're going to have an error saying that we passed list of ints and the function expects an int. So all you need to do to make it work is to add asterisk here at the beginning and convert this list to int array. And now it will work, and it will find you the sum of these numbers with these numbers here. And here comes the ending of the video. We have discussed a lot of information about functions. In the next video, which is part 3 and the last part of the functions videos, we're going to discuss the infix modifier for functions, higher order functions, extension functions, and lastly the lambda. Until next time, stay tuned and thanks for watching.